Our daily grind flour is called a multi-use flour. Because we don't put any preservatives or fortification in it, we can't call it all-purpose flour. But this is middle of the road for protein, so it's a blend of hard red and soft white winter wheat. So your protein content's around 13%, so it's really good for muffins and cookies and everyday baking that you would do. It's all made with locally grown, certified organic grains. So they're all within 100 kilometers of the mill. So we're very excited to be able to find locally produced grains. Our next flour that we make is the Red Fife flour. And Red Fife is actually a wheat that was brought over in the mid-1800s from Scotland. So it's a heritage grain, and it kind of fell out of favor to the modern day wheats because it doesn't have as high of yield when it's being grown in the fields. Typical wheats have a bit higher yields. They were kind of bred just to produce more and more, whereas the hard red spring wheat that's a Red Fife is a heritage grain, and it, as I said before, it fell out of favor to modern day wheats, but it has had a real resurgence in the last I'd say 20 years. People have really started to grow it again. It has a beautiful, beautiful nutty flavor. It's very hard, so it's got a protein content of around 12 or 13%, so it does make it really great for breads. But I use it all the time in pancakes. It has a really nice flavor. It's also certified organic and it's grown locally, so that was a really hard thing to find local Red Fife because it's such a rarity to find around here. But I really think in the next few years we're going to see a lot more of it, and its popularity will continue to grow. Next I have our cake and pastry flour. You can see by the color of the wheat it's a lot whiter, and it's made with a soft white winter wheat. So these grains are planted in the fall, and then they sprout a little bit in the fall, and then they overwinter. And these are the wheats that you see coming off kind of end of July. You'll see the soft white winter wheats coming off. Its protein content is lower. It's around 11%, 10-11%. So it makes really great cakes, pastries, fluffy things where you're not looking for that high gluten content. It's also a really nice flour to use, very soft, and typically we see a lot more soft red winter wheats. So some years I might be using a soft red winter wheat in our flours, but this year I was able to find a soft white winter wheat, and it just gives a lighter color. You'll notice with my flours also that the color is a lot darker and different than conventional flours because we're leaving the bran and the germ in it, and from the color of the wheat itself, the color of the flours will be darker than what you're used to, but that really just shows the nutritional value of it. You don't want to eat anything that's stark white because the color really shows the nutrition of the food that you're eating. So you'll be able to see it right away when you look at a bag of our flour compared to conventional flour. The rye flour is made with rye. You'll notice that the color of the rye almost has a gray-blue tinge to it. It's a really neat grain to grind and to use. It doesn't have as much of a husk as, say, the hard red spring wheat on it, so we get really nice flour made with this. This stuff we mill at 750 micrometers. That's just the sifter size. So we leave a little bit more of the bran in it because we know lots of people will be using the rye flour for breads. And we have a really great sourdough following and sourdough community. So we know that they like a bit stronger, a bit heartier flour, so that's why we leave a little bit more bran in it, because typically sourdoughs rise over 24 hours. But having said that, I also have a peanut butter cookie up online, the recipe using rye flour, and it has a lot more subtle flavor than what you think of when you think of rye. You think of a strong, almost caraway flavor, but definitely this rye has a lot more subtle flavor, but definitely it has a flavor. Next is our run-of-the-mill whole wheat. So this stuff is made with a hard red spring wheat as well. We leave everything in it, so we don't remove any of the bran. Exactly what's in the berry is what's in that bag. We don't add anything, and with all of our flours, we never bleach it. What you can do, so our bread flour here is made with that same hard red spring wheat. We remove a little bit more of the bran to make it a little easier to work with and to have a higher rise on the bread. The bran tends to cut the gluten strands, so that's why you won't get as high a rise with a hard reds or with a whole wheat flour than a bread flour. Even though they're made with the same grains, since we leave more bran in the whole wheat, the bran tends to cut the gluten strands, so we remove some of the bran so that you can get a little bit higher rise on the bread with the bread flour. One thing too, because none of these are ever bleached, they go through what's called a natural oxidation process. So you'll notice as you get your flour, you'll get it and it'll be very dark, and that's because we fresh mill everything. So when you fresh mill, it's like fresh cracked pepper. It has a lot more flavor. You can taste a lot more of the grain, but as it ages, you lose a little bit of the flavor. It gets a bit more subtle, but you'll notice that the flour gets a little bit whiter, and that's through natural oxidation. And that process converts the proteins into gluten. So as it ages, it produces more gluten, and it'll get a little bit higher rise to it. So it's one of those things that you can choose. You can choose a lot more flavor with a little bit less rise, or a little bit less flavor with a bit more rise. It's your choice, but definitely these flours will never get near the same color as conventionally milled flours. They'll always have a bit darker color to them.